Chili is the trusted partner for parsing, matching, and data enrichment, helping companies hire better talent faster. Chili offer innovative solutions built for the future of technology and recruiting to ATS, job boards, staffing agencies, and enterprises. They help you connect candidates with jobs by enhancing candidate experience, simplifying the hiring process, reducing hiring costs, saving time and money. Chili also has its multilingual resume parsing app available on Oracle Cloud Marketplace and Salesforce App Exchange. For more information, visit www.rchili.com.
What great ideas are so close within your grasp? Seeing other points of view, anticipating change, considering multiple possible turnouts, acknowledging uncertainty, searching for compromise. We're going to talk about how to get over those limiters of innovation so that you can extract better thinking from yourself and your team. So let's talk about how to win the future.
Employee referral programs don't work, right? So why bother? Joining me this week to discuss this is Sam Davies, CEO at RealLinks. Sam talked to me about setting up RealLinks as a non-techie, why technology can be used to overcome perceived issues with employee referral programs, and how employee advocacy can support referral programs. Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast, and it's my pleasure to welcome aboard Sam Davies. Sam, been wanting to get you on for a while. I'm sure a few people listening will kind of know about you and RealLinks, but for those people who don't, can you give us a little bit about your background and what you do today?
Yeah, absolutely, and great to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me along. So I set up RealLinks back in 2018. We started as a referral platform. I was previously selling my soul as a corporate lawyer. But it wasn't all bad because I got referred from one law firm to another, which was really the genesis of this idea. It just struck me that in both law firms where there were massive referral bonuses, nobody was referring. I know I was referred myself, but I was in the minority. We're talking below 5% referral hires in both organizations. They weren't being promoted. They weren't being encouraged, but I had a huge network of fellow lawyers that I could have reached out to, that I could have referred. But obviously I couldn't start a business based on a me problem. Went out to market and realized referrals generally across the board are failing, and they weren't doing well at all. I thought there'd be an opportunity to go to market with a solution. And as we'll talk about, I'm sure, it's then been an evolution of products since that time, but really focusing on the core problem of how do you engage employees. And we've morphed very much into employer brand advocacy and now internal comms. And have a range of different organizations that we work with, from enterprise down to SME, supporting them with a combination of those three pillars, which is referrals, advocacy, and internal comms.
I know I'm always interested to talk to founders like yourselves who've kind of come from one industry and then gone into building a tech product, right? Which it probably was at the time. Did you have any experience of kind of tech prior to saying I'm going to start a tech business?
None whatsoever. I think I'd been dreaming of setting up my own business since I was like 14, right? I was the sort of guy that would like bore his mates at the pub so they'd listen to my latest idea, and I think this was just so happened to be the first one that was credible enough to really go for, or maybe the first one that I was brave enough to go for. But no, I mean, it would have helped. I'd certainly do things differently this time around, but I was a real novice to start with.
I guess tell us what you kind of learned from that, because I know we've had many kind of tech founders on here, and I know we get kind of a lot of tech businesses that listen in. So is there kind of one thing when you started out that you wish you had have kind of known now, before we get into the crux of today?
Yeah, I think ultimately, if I drill it down, really bringing it back to make referrals advocacy work, to make internal comms work for that matter, you've got to master employee engagement. And I think that in retrospect, we probably went too far in terms of trying to build a really nice platform but we forgot the fundamental principle of how do you engage those employees to even come to your platform in the first place. And I think if I was to do things differently, I think we would have probably spent more time on a more basic MVP around employee engagement, and move from there. But we spent an awful lot of time focusing on the platform build based on them already being there. And I think that was we almost had to reverse engineer that subsequently. And that's something we probably would have done. It's difficult in B2B sort of SaaS. It's everyone talks about an MVP, but then you've got to find a company that's willing to really work with you on that MVP. And when you're new and a novice in an industry, that can sometimes be difficult. But I think if you can get that exposure, if you can work with a company on an MVP, not trying to necessarily create the perfect finished product, but probably the key ingredients to that, if you can identify them, which again is sometimes hard to do, but if you can drill down what those key features are that are going to deliver success for you and your platform, test those methodically with whoever you possibly can, before you continue to build. Otherwise, you spent a long time building without solving one of the key problems you need to overcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. So let's talk about kind of employer referrals and advocacy, and really let's start with the referrals piece. And this isn't meant to be in any way kind of confrontational, but why should we even bother or care, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine that a lot of businesses have had a crack at this, probably very manually at some point, and decided we can never get it to work. Doesn't matter what we offer or how we structure the kind of the scheme or anything like that. We just can't get it. We just can't get it to switch on. We just can't get it to work, right? So convince us that we should be concentrating on this and how we can do it better.
I think it's a really salient point you make. I think a lot of the time when you speak to companies, they'll say exactly that. And predominantly they'll be using what is really basic functionality within the ATS. So what we're talking about here, James, is essentially like the ability for a candidate to maybe select from a drop down that this was a referral and who the referee was, right. Or they can the person can copy a link anyway. And you follow that methodology, and you're gonna get 5% annual hires via referrals, maybe 10%. And you'll speak to a lot of people who'll say exactly what you're saying, which is, I've tried it, I've given it a go, I've maybe increased my referral bonus amount, and it hasn't resulted in taking me over that amount. And subsequently, my belief is referrals are probably only going to amount to like 5-10% of annual hires. And that they perceive that genuinely as good. Mm-hmm. My strong opinion, from based on what I see with our client base, is that is not good. Good is 30% plus. Good can be achieved. So our goal with every new client we work with is getting them to that 30% plus mark. Will you get there within 6 months, a year? That will depend on your starting point. If we're going to go and work with a company that's on 2% annual hires via referrals, I'm not going to promise them 30% plus in 6 months, but that is where we will get them to. Mm-hmm. So there's a misconception in market as to what is possible with referrals, and also what good looks like. Mm-hmm. Good is not 8%, 10%. Good isn't even 15%. Good is 30%. And if you can do that, like in terms of the results, deeper metrics, deeper impact for your business in terms of like time to hire, retention rates, reduction in agency spend, improving your application to hire ratio, for example, can have a huge impact. But yeah, I think the starting point, as you quite rightly say, is a misconception of what referrals can achieve. But I see day in, day out with our client base that it's a lot higher and a lot more impactful than people realize it can be.
Again, not wanting to put you onto the spot or kind of give away too much about how you guys kind of go about it, but surely that is a 30% across the business as an average, and there must be areas within businesses that you see are better than others, right? So you must have some parts of some businesses, I don't know, maybe the finance department are just terrible at referrals, right? And they don't do it particularly well or something. So, there must be some stats you can kind of share with us around that you see within business that, where if we were going into this, if the businesses are listening, right, and they're doing something like this already, where potentially should they kind of concentrate on to get this to really work?
So I think it's a really interesting point you make. But I'm just going to build on it slightly before I answer it.
Sure.
You don't necessarily need referrals everywhere, right? So, and a lot of the time, companies will focus from a stats perspective on just that overall figure. But it might be that in one area of the business, you're sort of already inundated with good applications. And what would be the point of leveraging referrals there? Or you've pretty much closed the role. Why would you want more referrals for that role? That's just creating more work for the recruitment team. One of the other big learnings, there've been many learnings since I set this up, was moving more towards a campaign methodology with the platform. So turning referrals on and off where and when you need them, and thinking about the personas that you're trying to appeal to. So we need to hire X number of developers in the tech team. We're going to create, based on the Real-Links templates, a campaign that will appeal to those developers, relevant content included within that campaign to the extent that it exists. Not all companies will have that. Again, you could do it just with jobs. But then the comms that are automated that fire from the platform are tailored to that persona, to those employees. So in terms of referral being higher in certain areas than others within an organization, that can be the case, but you can always get it high. It just requires putting together campaigns that are tailored for that particular employee group. We work with a range. We work with deskless employees who are operating in warehouses. We work with finance teams, tech teams, marketing teams. The way that you still achieve good results with those teams is to run targeted campaigns with relevant jobs, relevant pieces of content. And when you do that, you will see a big uplift regardless of where you're doing it. If you take the age-old approach of every Monday, an email goes out to the whole company with the latest 5 jobs, regardless of where you sit in the organization. I'm in the tech team, you've just sent me 5 marketing teams. Not to say that your networks can't be broader, but the chances of you having relevant people are far lower. When you start sending people relevant jobs, relevant pieces of content, the engagement levels that you then see go way up. So I guess in a roundabout answer to your question, you can achieve good results wherever you're targeting, wherever you need referrals, but it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach, and it certainly can't be a brain-numbing email that goes out company-wide, which is often the case, that doesn't really consider relevancy.
It's interesting because you're treating kind of referrals as marketing, right?
Yep.
These are marketing tactics that you're basically kind of you're employing here, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Go on. Sorry, Sam.
No. It's spot on, and I think it's. I look at it as proactive referrals and passive referrals. We'll facilitate at the pub, workout. Somebody is looking for a job. I'll put them forward, or I might have worked with an ex-colleague. That's passive. What we're talking about here is proactive marketing campaigns to turn referrals on when and where you need them. And that can be, honestly, it goes through the roof. Another aspect to this is moving away when you're running these campaigns, moving away from just rewarding people based on hires, right? So as you'll well know, when you run a marketing campaign, like if the reward is potential hire or somebody passing probation in sort of 6-9 months time, for extremely long processes, it's quite hard to build momentum in a campaign. But if you start rewarding people with points or tickets for shares, for views, for applications, for interviews, as well as hires, when you're running a campaign like this, say a 6-week hiring drive campaign in a particular area, you can really build momentum because people are getting that recognition. They continue to take more actions. But you're 100% right. It's looking at from a marketing perspective.
The other thing I would imagine that you probably come up against a lot is kind of employee pushback and motivating the employees to do this in the first place. And I know a lot of it is kind of automated, but there must be some kind of resistance you kind of get internally to say, I'm not sure I want this stuff going out on my channels.
So from an employee engagement standpoint, just to, again, almost going back to the first thing that we spoke about there, That's where the gamification is fundamentally really important, so that they get that recognition. I used to run a lot of focus groups around this. Be like, I'm not being recognized. I put forward 2 people who were good. They didn't get hired. I just stopped putting people forward. When you give them that instant recognition, it helps to bring people back. But secondly, the other piece of feedback that you got is like employees are time poor, right? And this goes to my thing around not spending a lot of time focusing on a platform rather than focusing on how to engage them and meeting them where they are. I think our guiding principle now in everything that we do from an engagement standpoint, if you want them to participate in a campaign or just participate generally in terms of referrals or advocacy, in terms of sharing content, you need to meet them where they are. So if you're a Slack house, you need to be able to share the job and share the piece of content directly from Slack. If you're a Teams house, exactly the same principle. If you're an email house, same principle. If you're a deskless worker, we need to be sending them push notifications so that they can do that directly, one click on mobile. Clicks kill engagement. So in terms of persuading them to participate in a campaign, a lot of it will come down to your reward structure, your gamification, but also a lot of it will come down to meeting them where they are and making it incredibly easy for them to participate. We saw engagement rates almost double. So, like, the gamification existed in platform from way back when. That was almost like it's improved obviously over time, but the concept was there. What wasn't there until about a year and a half ago was almost being native in these channels. That honestly has transformed the business and the results. It's so that I think is probably how you persuade. You also probably need to give them a bit of a like. So we'll give them examples of the different copy they could use when they post on social media, sort of like help to guide them a little bit, because not everyone is au fait with like posting on LinkedIn or Facebook, and that could be a bit of an anxious thing to do. So you'll give them some wording that they can use when they push out, for example.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you've mentioned kind of advocacy and referrals, and I can see how those two things completely align. But this is basically, is enveloping internal comms as well, right? And surely this is becoming the same thing.
100%, because I mean, just to connect the dots, really, it's if we're talking referrals, you're coming up with tactics to engage people to share jobs. If you're talking advocacy, you're coming up with tactics to engage people to share content. And we're seeing a growing trend now in market of companies wanting to do both things under one roof. And I think this is probably where we were at an advantage, because we started in the referral space. We built all of the ATS integrations. And subsequently, when we moved into the advocacy place, we're offering all of that functionality around sharing content online, but we're also giving you the additional tracking of, well, how many applications, interviews, and hires did this lead to? But you're exactly right. Because our big learning was meet people where they are with automated comms on Slack and Teams and email, we're now finding our client base say to us, what you've got here on particularly, because a lot of internal comms tools, historically, they've done a lot in email, but we see it day in, day out when we look at our metrics. You see better metrics from an engagement standpoint on Slack and Teams, to the extent you have those channels, than you do on email. And they're looking at our tool and they're saying, hang on a sec here, could we, this has been happening more and more over the last 6 months, can we just start using this for internal comms? Because we have internal activations, right? We may have an event that we want to promote to employees. We might have a webinar or a thought leader coming in, for example. So we're now seeing all of these other use cases for the platform, whether it be an event promotion, whether it be signing up for something, whether it just be sharing internal content to give people updates. They're using the tool more and more for that now, as well as referrals and advocacy. So what started as referrals has now got sort of 3 key pillars, which is kind of exciting for us. And I see that becoming more and more of a need for internal comms teams, moving beyond email, making sure that you have the toolkit to do exactly the same thing in Teams and Slack.
Yeah. Almost kind of bordering on internal comms enablement or something like that, right? I mean,
yeah, 100%. We're talking to a client at the moment where where they want to get people to sign up for this particular event, and they've had historically a tool which has done that via email, but the engagement stats are dropping a bit off a cliff with it. They're like, can we do the same thing, but can we start doing it on Slack? But the other aspect to it that I thought was sort of interesting with this use case is they want to apply our gamification that we've got for the advocacy and referrals to internal comms.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking at like, okay, if people sign up for if people consume the content that we're pushing, we'd like to give them tickets or tokens or points, whatever your verbiage is. But also potentially give them points to the extent they sign up for the event. So you can actually take the learnings around gamification from advocacy and referrals and apply that to the internal comms piece as well, which is interesting.
The only thing that kind of, with that specific example, that kind of potentially is you're forcing people to kind of sign up so they can get a reward. They may not actually want to go to this event, but they just sign up because they're going to get a token or whatever.
It's a fair point. And look, I don't think this is all use cases, right?
Yeah,
but I think it's an interesting sort of additional string to your bow.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting to see the whole thing kind of wrapped up in an internal comms kind of strategy, which kind of brings me on to the kind of the last point really is, can this be used for other strategic goals? Can referrals be more strategic for, I don't know, early careers? You mentioned this before we kind of got, there's pieces around that. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think I'm a big advocate of this. So I think, yes, it can. I think 2 use cases currently being used by our clients would be early careers and ED&I. We just ran a really successful ED&I campaign with Great Western Railway, where they wanted to get more female drivers applying for roles, essentially. Just in that area of the business, it's usually quite low. And this is actually a really good example of advocacy and referrals and the importance of the two things being combined. So we ran a 3-week campaign. They have a Women in Rail employee resource group. This was, again, a good example of internal comms and meeting employees where they are. So during the 3-week period, they'd receive automatic prompts on Teams. This ERG, by the way, was a mixture of men and women. So you had male allies as well. And they'd produce really amazing content about like what it was like to be a female driver. Or there was another piece on there that was cool, which was sort of a more senior female driver mentoring a junior one and talking about that process. But linked to the content was a job. So it was a general expression of interest for female drivers. Really good engagement from the employee resource group in terms of sharing that content, pushing it out. But also a huge uplift in terms of the percentage of female applications compared to what is normal. So I think it was 27% female applications, which was, I think it was well over double what it normally is. So again, that's a really great example of like using advocacy and referrals like for a strategic goal, which in this case was getting more female applications. But the plan is now with GWR, we're going to be running campaigns with every other employee resource group that they have within the organization, which is super exciting. You also mentioned early careers. We work with a company called Optiva. They're a Dutch-based headquartered company, but operate globally. And they use the platform with interns. So they have a group of summer interns that come and do an internship with them. But they want those interns to go back to campus and become brand ambassadors for them. So they'll be back on campus and they'll be prompted to share content and jobs with their fellow students. And they end up filling the pipe of their next round of internships really effectively by using these brand ambassadors. We've got a number of other organizations I can't mention at this point that are planning to do exactly the same thing. But it's like, when you talk about employer brand advocacy or referrals, I think you made a good point earlier on. It's more than just a percentage increase of referral hires, isn't it? It's like, where are you using it? Same thing with advocacy. It's like, we should be measuring more than how many career site visits, for example, that we're getting. You can start using advocacy and referrals for these wider objectives, particularly, to go back to a point I've made a few times, when you combine referrals and advocacy together. Because it wouldn't be enough for Optiva just to look at shares, views, right? Or reach. They want to fill their pipe for next year. Similarly with GWR, again, that reach is super important, typical advocacy measures, but actually the key metric for them was, well, how many female applications did that lead to? So
Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. It's been fascinating. If anybody wants to know more about you and Real Links, we'll obviously include all of your details in the show notes. But just for anyone listening, where can we find the details? What's the web address?
Yeah. So if you go to reallinks.io, you can check out our website, or you could also email me at sam@reallinks.io, and I'll be happy to have a chat with you as well. Hope you enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thank you very much, Sam. Thanks for listening. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the Marketing Rules podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all other major podcasting platforms. I've been your host, James Whitelock, and I hope you can join me and more amazing guests next time.